Tom, last week we were talking about the baby reindeer. Have you seen anything of the aftermath of it?
Yeah, I did see the Piers Morgan interview. I saw bits of it, like highlights.
What did you think?
I thought the consensus was that she is just as crazy as Richard Gabb makes her out to be in the TV show.
I totally agree with you. I can't argue with that, especially after seeing the one-to-one show with Piers Morgan. But there was something really interesting what was brought up by Piers Morgan after that. He was discussing the fact that because Netflix portrayed it as a true story, and if there's elements in there that actually weren't true, and Fiona Harvey, the real Martha, can prove that it's not true, then there could be a legal issue for Netflix.
Oh yeah, because they did say that a lot in the marketing campaign. They were saying that it is a true story quite a bit. I didn't think about it from that perspective, but yeah, if they do say that, then she does have a bit of a case if it's fictionalized in any kind of way.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the reasons why it was so successful is because they portrayed it as a true story and had more impact because people are like, oh my God, this actually happened to these people.
Yeah.
Even more so as Richard Gadd, the man who was actually the person who was stalked, etc., played himself in Baby Reindeer, adding that element of realism to it. But if the elements of realism were actually fictional and they were very negative towards Fiona, the real Martha, then surely Netflix is in trouble.
Well, that's it, because he was on a lot of TV shows and stuff. I saw him on This Morning and stuff, talking about how it was, like how it happened and all them kind of things. So that is quite a big point. That, and if she wins that'd be quite big.
Yeah, and there's one of the CEOs, I think he was a CEO, who was somebody quite high up in Netflix, talking about Baby Reindeer, promoting it, and once again mentioned the fact that it was a harrowing true story.
Yeah.
There is so much evidence out there from Netflix saying this is a true story that I think if it went to a legal matter, Fiona Harvey has got a genuine case against Netflix.
Yeah. What do you think she could get if she won that case?
I really don't know, but I don't even know how much like Richard Gere would have made from this. I don't know if he'd have just got a single contract up front and he'd have signed, agreed it no matter on the success of it, or if there's something residuals on the back of it. I don't know, but do you think, because I remember you mentioned this to me, about there could be another angle of it where Netflix kind of potentially knew about what the aftermath would bring?
Yeah, definitely. Like, it was a calculated risk, so that they knew that the controversy would happen, so they intentionally provoked it anyway, just to get more eyes on the screen and more people looking at Netflix.
I mean, they made it so obvious how to find Fiona Harvey from it. Some of the dialogue is ripped directly from her tweets.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because they are portraying it as a true life story, and she could get them for defamation as well if some of the things that are happening aren't entirely true. Then it is defamation, isn't it? Because it's not hard to figure out who she is.
It's completely, it's a 180 where people felt sorry for Richard Gere, that oh my God, who's this crazy stalker who terrorised you for so long and your family, to a woman who was very easy to identify by the general public. Within 10 minutes or so, you could go online and find out who the real Martha was, who potentially people believe is a certain way due to the nature of a fictional portrayal of herself portrayed as a real story.
Yeah, exactly. I saw what's it called? I've seen a thing about how Netflix have got to do things like this now, though, because they're finding it hard to keep up with other companies like Amazon Prime and Disney, because a lot of these other companies, it's the same with Spotify. They're having to do the same sort of thing, where all these other companies have competitive advantages over companies like Netflix, because they can sell you on like a whole ecosystem. So like if you're with Amazon Prime, then you can get Amazon Music, you can get deliveries, you can get the TV shows, the movies, you can do all that. Whereas Netflix haven't really got that angle, so they're having to do more extreme things like create more controversial documentaries. Did see an article about that I thought was interesting.
So, what do you think the future is for content? If this is, does this strategy actually work?
I think a lot of things, they can't really compete with price because they've got to keep their costs down as well. So they've got to be similar or better price than all these other companies, because they can sell you on the ecosystem, And that's I think what we're moving towards. If you look at companies like Apple as well, they're doing a lot of things to integrate their ecosystem to force you into buying an iPhone or buying an iMac if you're using the two different things. Like, I'm feeling the pressure right now. It'd be so much easier for me to just get an iPhone rather than sticking with Android just for connectivity and sharing and things like that, and uploading things to TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. Because obviously with our work, we're constantly uploading things to social media to promote ourselves, and it's way more difficult doing that through a Mac and an Android than it would be to do it through Apple to Apple, because it could just airdrop things. So I think that's the future we're moving to, where a lot of these streaming services and companies try and keep you within their ecosystem. And again, Apple's doing that with Apple TV as well.
Absolutely. I am an iPhone user. I've been for many, many years, apart from 18 months where I took out and I thought, I'm going to try Android, and I got the Google phone.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the best experience I had. And one of it was because I was so used to the productivity through the connectivity of the Apple umbrella. And I didn't have that anymore. And then when I went back to it, things like AirDrop, things that I put in my notes then were appearing on my Mac. Everything was perfectly synced. And it wasn't long I went back to Apple. I'd experienced Android and I thought, you know what, I guess I'm an Apple kind of guy. But reverting back to Baby Reindeer before we move on into our own lives, I think that all the things that we're seeing with Martha is just the first wave.
Yeah.
There's another character. When I say character, I have to be careful with that, because there's another portrayal of someone in Baby Reindeer who I believe was worse than Martha. It was the Darian. What's his name again? Sorry.
Yeah, you're talking about Darian.
The Darian character, and the Darian character, for the people who've watched the show and the people who haven't watched the show, is somebody who was abusive, you could say grooming, and it took a twist to a drug-fueled sexual relationship between Richard Gadd's character and this Dorian character. And if people have hunted out Fiona, Martha, how long is it going to be before they hunt out the other character?
Because supposedly as well, in the portrayal in the TV show, he actually works in film and television as well. So he might be well known. We don't know who he is, but he could be pretty well known. I don't think it'll take people very long to work out who it was.
He should be more known than Fiona Harvey.
Yeah, he should be. So yeah, you'd imagine this second wave will be way bigger than what's going on now.
I honestly think that they're still feeding on the Martha stuff, and we're seeing where that goes. It could end up in a court case. It could end up Martha / Fiona Harvey versus Netflix. But in the background, what's simmering, what's slowly boil, is that story. And I believe it's only a matter of time before somebody in the media starts announcing who the real life person is.
Yeah, because it's way worse, I think, in my opinion, what he's doing than what the Martha in the TV show was doing, because it is actually sexual abuse.
Yeah, it's very dark, and I found it even more disturbing, but this could be the nature of the relationship between potential victim and attacker, where Richard Gadd's character, Richard Gadd himself, because again, the interesting nature of the show where Richard Gadd plays Donnie, and Donnie is a portrayal of Richard Gadd. I'm kind of blurring the lines between reality and fiction with this show. He went back to his groomer several times, even knowing what happened previously.
Yeah, and it destroyed his relationship for it as well. And he was lying to her about what was happening.
Yeah, and it kind of, as we discussed in the previous episode, provoked this new awakening in Gadd himself. But regardless of that, there has to be a manhunt for this other character. And I think it's only a matter of time before that person becomes the forefront, almost more headline snatching than Fiona Harvey.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that. I think it'd be way worse. I think there'll be way more emotions involved in that, and there'll be. I do think if I had to guess, I would say there's more people that could relate to that as well than the stalking element. I think it's much more in the national conscience than stalking is. Even though I think stalking's a big issue, I think a lot more people will be able to relate with that kind of content.
I also wonder what And I think it's going to be a torn opinion of Richard Gadd. I think that some people are going to sympathise with him because what he went through. But I think other people are going to question his actions and his motives and who he is. Fair play to him, he does describe himself as a flawed human being. But I don't know with what's happened in the aftermath by allowing people to quickly identify who Fiona Harvey is and how he was. Is he protecting almost his relationship with Darian? I don't know, but I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how the perception of Richard Gadd also plays out in all this.
Well, this is the question. Do you think they care about the perception? Or do you think this was all a plan anyway to create controversy? And as long as your eyeballs are on the screen, it doesn't really matter what you think of them.
The thing is, from Netflix perspective, the goal is always going to be have a hit show.
Yeah.
Which they've got in abundance. This is Richard Gadd's story, and it was a good chunk of his life for a long period of time. Could Richard Gadd be as successful if he made something completely different? It wouldn't have the same impact because it'd be Richard Gadd playing a character, and that character could be something in a sitcom or, I don't know, be something completely different. At best, does it become the presenter of a documentary that goes around looking at stalking? I don't know, but everything after Baby Reindeer, I can't be 100% sure, but I don't think it'll. I think this is going to be the peak of anything he does.
Yeah, I think so as well, because it's about him, and the whole appeal of it is that it's a true story, and that's what they've done with the marketing. Didn't you? You told me it was like 13 times that they mentioned that it was a true story.
I'm sure. I could be. Well, I say I'm sure, but I actually could be wrong. Piers Morgan said something in I think it was in the marketing, and I could be wrong, but it was a high number where they actually mentioned a true story, and it was pinned on the fact that it was a true story. That's what gave it such emphasis of what was going on. That's what gave it the impact. If it wasn't a true story and it was just another stalker story, it wouldn't have the same kind of impact, because when it is real, we feel it more. Yeah. And from this point onward, what Richard Gadd, I don't know how he can do it unless they try and somehow construct a narrative based on what's happening right now, where they have a Piers Morgan character interview, where they do this and they do that, and they have almost like a sequel. But that sequel almost feels like it's just kind of fabricated to give them a second season when it isn't actually the story anymore.
Well, I don't know if you got this feel, but when it first came out and we were all watching it, it felt like a very community experience watching it, because everyone was watching it. And if you go on social media, on any of the social media, it's everywhere. People are speaking about it, and they're commenting about it, and they're talking about it. And when I got told to watch it, it was on the basis that it was a true story, and that's why you should watch it. So I feel like it's a very successful thing for them to do. And like, is this going to be the new precedent that's set, that it doesn't matter if you have some blowback in a court case, as long as you came in and made the money, it doesn't really matter what way you've done it. It's sort of like does the ends justify the means?
Yeah, I think you could be on something there, because even if Netflix had to pay out on Fiona Harvey, it probably would only be a fraction of what they made from this show. So it was actually financially worth it. I think for Netflix, it's a no-brainer. I think the jury's out on what happens to Richard Gadd and his career after this. I believe this will be the peak. And I do believe that potentially Fiona Harvey could be in for a windfall from a court case or a payoff from Netflix, because if she can prove that what was going on wasn't actually a true story.
It's how you prove that, though. That would be interesting to watch.
I think that they said she went to jail, so if she didn't go to prison, if she's got no criminal record, and she can prove it, which is quite easy to do, that she doesn't have a criminal record, and they say she did, I think that alone will form the basis of an investigation. Yeah.
And then you've got then the next thing is that she's got to prove that the person who's in that film, in the TV show Martha, is based on her. Yeah,
and
it's not too difficult. I think if you're in with a jury who are judging you on your own terms, then it's pretty easy to prove that. I think she would win that.
Yeah, she clearly is. Martha clearly is Fiona Harvey. I mean, they've literally ripped quotes from off Twitter, like we said. Anyway, it's very interesting to talk about something topical with baby reindeer, and I do love it. But I'm also interested in the real world of Tom, not just Fiona Harvey and Richard Gadd. What have you been up to, Tom?
Well, I've just got back from a place called Kelowna in the interior of BC. I've been out there for the past, how many days? 4 days. I left on Thursday, got back yesterday. It's about a 4.5 hour drive from where I live in Vancouver, which isn't considered far over here. I mean, when me and Emily moved out to Halifax from Liverpool, that was considered quite a far move. But over here, that's like commuter time, which is an hour. So you've got to sort of adjust your head and stuff like that. So, we've been out there for 4 days shooting an Indian wedding. So we've had different events on each day. So what a lot of people don't know is Indian weddings take place over 4 days, and there's different events on each day. So you'll have like you'll have the first day, which is where the groom's family and the bride's family come together and they celebrate together, have a little sort of party. And what they'll do is they'll put a lot of this paint substance on the skin, and it's, I don't know what it is to signify, but they put this paint substance on the skin and stuff, and then the next day they'll put these beads around the arms, and these bangles they're called, and they'll do that for the wife. And then they have the ceremony, which usually it starts at like 6:30 in the morning. That's what time we start shooting, and we'll finish at about 7 each day. So it's very long days, but you don't have a reception with the Indian wedding. On the day of the wedding, you'll do like the getting ready, then the ceremony, then you'll go to the bride's house and do something called a doli, which is where the bride's given away to the groom. So what they do is the groom will have to get into the house, and the way that he gets into the house is he's got to negotiate with the bridesmaids on a price to pay for the bride. If that makes sense. It's a game, like it's not like a it's not like a real like transaction, but basically it's quite fun to film. The bridesmaids will all stand in front of the house and block the entrance, and he's got to stand with his groomsmen in front of the bridesmaids, and the bride's in the back. She's not part of the discussion. And what happens is the bridesmaids will set a price, say like 5,000 Canadian dollars, and then he can get that price down by doing different tasks. So say for example, one of them was what I did a few months ago. The groom had to do more push-ups than one of the bridesmaids to get $500 off. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you can do all different things. He had to, like that one that I did last week. He had to name all the schools that she'd ever been to get $1,000 off. So I think he ended up paying like $1,800 or something. And then he pays it to the bridesmaids, and then they divvy it up between themselves or something like that. It is quite cool to watch. And then what happens is he comes into the house, they chat for a bit, and they eat food and do all that stuff, and then they'll do something called the rice throwing. So the bride grabs hold of the groom's, like he has like his turban on, and he has like the Sikh outfit, and she'll grab like his sort of cape thing that he has. It's like it's rolled up like cloth. And he walks out of the house in front of her, and she grabs it. And as she's walking out, she has to throw rice over her shoulder. I'm not sure why, but that signifies her leaving the parental home and moving into the married home. And it was quite emotional. Like people are crying and stuff because this is like the daughter finally leaving. So yeah, that was what happens.
Firstly, because this is a lot to digest. When they finally agree on a sum between the bridesmaids, obviously it's just for show and it's just a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Does he actually give them real money?
Yeah.
Just like
it's real money. Yeah. He has to actually pay it. Yeah. It's in cash.
So he pays it in cash, and then they do genuinely split it up.
Yeah.
So it said that God, can you imagine if you had some bridesmaids who didn't actually like you, and you'd be like, all right, what can I do to like knock $1,000 off? And they're like, I don't know, do 400 chin-ups.
They could do. They can do whatever. They can ask you whatever they want. It is fun to watch though, because it's usually what happens is the groom, they have to like barter. So the groom will be bartering stuff, and then the bridesmaids will say, "Well, is your wife not worth that much?" so that's usually what happens.
Oh my god. And the bridesmaids are the one who take the money home as well. If weddings didn't cost enough, you have to pay the bridesmaids, and that could be any amount of money. It could be thousands just to get your wife, but you're already married.
Well, the thing is, another element of Indian weddings is they have something called the shogun, which is, this is where they recuperate a bit. So the bride and groom will sit on a stage on 2 chairs, and everyone who comes to the wedding, you can choose whether you do this though, you don't have to do this, but everyone who's attending the event, they'll come up and take a photo with the bride and groom, and they'll give them money. And it's not like small amounts as well, or I don't see it as small amounts. It's usually like per person, like $150, something like that. So, and you think
I don't see it.
They'll have like
I don't see
350
it
people.
small either.
Yeah. There's like 350 people there, so they do recuperate a bit with that. So yeah, he's got to pay her, and because this wedding that I did last week, the bride's family, they were from Canada, they were from BC, and the groom's family were from Minnesota in the US. So the big discussion was whether he was paying in US dollars or Canadian dollars, because the US dollar is a bit stronger than the Canadian dollar. So the bridesmaids would get more if he paid in USD.
Right, that's they've obviously thought a lot about this. The house as well, where they leave together, is that actually like her parents' home, or is that like just something for the show?
Usually it is, but this last week it wasn't. Usually it'd be the bride's house, but this week they went to another family member's house because they only fake leave the house. They come back as soon as it's done. You know what I mean? It's just a tradition, and then so the bride and groom in this one, they drove off after the rice throwing and then turned around and came straight back in the house. But the house was absolutely massive. It was I think it was worth something like 8 million Canadian dollars. This big giant house on the top of a hill. It was huge. It had so many bedrooms and stuff. It was like a really big luxurious house with a pool and stuff, and it was quite cool to film in.
So before you shot an Indian wedding, did you have to research into Indian weddings to make sure that you were doing it justice?
So what I would recommend anyone does before they go and shoot a different culture's wedding is to try and second shoot for someone else who's experienced with it. Try and obviously watch videos, get as much experience as you can. But what I did was I got some second shooter jobs with different videographers who already shoot Indian weddings. And that means I can tag along with them and I can just shoot and watch how they frame things and watch how they work and how many cameras they use and the equipment that they use. Because I find that with, say, traditional British weddings, the kit that you need is very different. The things that you invest in are different. Like a good example would be I can get away with shooting a wedding in the UK on 2 SD cards or even 1 SD card and 1 camera, whereas I wouldn't turn up to an Indian wedding without 3 cameras and 6 SD cards.
Why is that? Just because there's more to shoot?
The deliverables are different. So in an Indian wedding, I'll be delivering a 2-hour film, whereas with a British wedding, it'd be more like a 6-minute, 10-minute highlight film.
Wow. So if it's a 2-hour film, that's literally the length of a feature film.
Exactly. Well, a lot of it, though, isn't as editing intensive as you'd imagine. A lot of it will be, like, for example, this is something that British couples aren't really interested in, or white Canadian couples aren't interested in, which would be the Indian couples want the full dancing. So I'll set up a camera on a tripod, and it'll roll for the whole night with the dancing, and I'll cut that down a little bit, but it'll be mostly the entire dancing of all the people.
Yeah, so because they want the entirety of the dance, you don't actually have to edit it. They actually want it to just roll and let it be.
Well, what I'll normally do is I'll set one camera up on a tripod, and then I'll be in amongst everyone dancing, and I'll shoot one big long continuous clip for about an hour of everyone dancing, and then I'll cut between the wide, and I'll cut between that and me holding the handheld camera, just for when I'm moving around the dance floor and stuff. You don't want to show that bit, so there is a bit of editing, but it's quite simple to do. It's not too difficult.
Do you enjoy doing Indian weddings?
I do. I think it has different challenges to the weddings I normally shoot. It's harder in different ways, but it's definitely better if you want to earn more money per wedding, because obviously there's a lot more work to do for an Indian wedding than the weddings I would usually shoot. So you can charge more, but then there is a lot more work to take into account, and it's not for the faint-hearted. It's not something you go and do straight away if you're just getting into weddings, because there's a lot more to think about, and there's a lot more that's important to the couple than most other weddings that I shoot. So say, for example, like groom preps, when the groom's putting his turban on, they do the turban tying, and there's like a piece of jewellery that goes in the middle. That's quite important to them. So if you compare that to, say, a white wedding, the groom preps isn't anywhere nearly as important, because usually the groom doesn't really mind if he gets filmed or not. What I find in my weddings is it's usually the bride wants me to film the groom, and the groom's not too bothered, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah, she wants to watch the footage back of her man getting prep for the wedding,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
it doesn't. But it doesn't have the same cultural impact or status impact as what an Indian wedding does. So you've shot this. So you've been out there shooting for days. This wedding. What's the turnaround like? When did they expect you to deliver it for? How long have you got?
6 months usually. It depends on the company that's shooting the video, but a lot of people do 12 months. But I don't think you need to do 12 months. I think 6 months is usually the standard that I set. But with other weddings that I shoot, it's 3 months because there's obviously a lot less deliverables. I do offer longer films for white couples as well. It's just they don't tend to go for that. They don't tend to choose that as an option. But yeah, 6 months is what I say for Indian weddings, and usually I'll have it done between 3 to 4 months. But you always give yourself more of a buffer, so that if you are late on anything, you do have the time, and the couple's not expecting anything. Because obviously, the worst thing you can do is contact them close to the 6 month mark and say, "Listen, it's not gonna be done in time." And I'm sure they'll understand, but it's still they're waiting for their video. So I always think that you should overestimate and then pull it back so that they get a surprise. It's done earlier. That makes sense.
No, yeah, it does. It's all about managing expectations, and you manage the expectations of the client. It's not devious. It's making sure that you can deliver on it, and you're factoring in the different things, different variables that you might not appreciate at the time. You might fall down unwell.
Yeah, exactly.
Something you're in Canada now, but you're English and you've got a family back home in England. If something happens to somebody back home in England, you might have to jump on a plane and back over here. While that's going on, you need to buy yourself some time because you're not going to be able to edit if you're dealing with a family matter back in the UK. It's all about managing expectations and making sure that you always meet deadlines. So even if, say, for example, you think, well, realistically, this will take me the best part of 4 months, there's nothing wrong with setting you that 6 months buffer. And then if you get it in before that, they'll be very thankful.
Yeah.
But if you got it in late, obviously they're going to be a little bit agitated because it's such a thing for them. It's such a thing for any couple that's just got married or been through any ceremony. They're dying to watch it back.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's gonna, yeah. So they're gonna wanna see it ASAP. But at the same time, it's also very important from your perspective that what you deliver is the best version of that video it can be, because honestly I don't do weddings. Well, I'll tell you about the potential in a minute. I don't do weddings, and I've shot all kinds of things from documentaries to music videos to commercials. Weddings scare me maybe more than any of them because I know how important it is for so many individuals, and I know it's a one-shot deal. There's no going back the day after saying, you know what, I've kind of screwed up the audio on the speeches, so can we get everybody back and do it again next Tuesday?
Well, exactly. That's why you need to invest in the right kit, the good kit that will perform well. And more importantly than having the most fancy equipment is how reliable is your kit? How well do you know it? Like, because a lot of things in these weddings, especially Indian weddings, things happen in different orders and they happen spontaneously and sporadically, and you can't always control what's happening. Like a big one is these Indian weddings. There's a lot of people. Like for me, before I came to Canada, say like 150 guests. That was quite a lot. Whereas every single Indian wedding I've been to is 300 plus. So you're dealing with a lot more people, a lot more coverage that you need to try and cram into the video. And then you've got the issue of, say, for example, with the what we were talking about with the games before, where the groom's got to try and get the price down. What will often happen is loads of people will cram into that one area. So you're literally like shoulder to shoulder with people, and you're trying to like work, and you've got to like quickly think on the fly of what you can do with your kit to achieve the best results. Because these clients, they don't want excuses. They don't want to hear how you didn't do this or that. You should have the experience and know how to deal with that situation. So you only get one crack at it, so you need to be able to do it well. And that's what I would say for anyone starting out. You need to go and second shoot for people, see how it is, experience it yourself, because no amount of YouTube videos is going to prepare you for what it's actually like on the day to be faced with that pressure when something goes wrong.
Yeah, and that'd be the worst thing in the world, that something goes wrong on a wedding, because you know it's such a one-shot deal. And if you don't get it there and then, if you don't get it in the moment on their wedding day, then you're never going to get it. And that's a scary prospect. And, you know, I tip my hat to anybody who shoots weddings because of that pressure. And no doubt you've done a trillion now and you're very comfortable with it, but still I'd be a little bit nervous. So moving on, ironically, talking about weddings, which is a topic today, and wedding videography, through somebody who I'd previously done some work with, they asked me would it be okay if I passed my details on to somebody who they knew who was getting married, because they want a wedding videographer for their wedding. And I stated, as they knew, I said, I don't really shoot weddings. I have done in the past, 2 or 3, I think it is max. It's not something I gravitate to because it's just not the direction that I've took my career in. However, if something comes my way and everything lines up, I definitely consider it. But obviously, it's been a while since I've shot a wedding, and since I've got you here right now, like, I need some advice and tips. What should I be doing and what shouldn't I be doing? If you can like bullet point it into like a very few like simplistic, almost like bullet point list, what should or shouldn't I be doing when I'm shooting a wedding? And by the way, just for clarity, this is your standard Christian wedding back home in the UK.
Okay, so first thing you've said is Christian wedding. Are they getting married in a church?
Yeah, they're getting married in a church and the reception is elsewhere.
So churches are notorious for having issues with videographers and photographers. So what you need to do is you need to, first of all, get in touch with the couple and make sure that the church is okay with them filming. What are they okay with? Are you allowed to plug into the sound system? Are you allowed to mic them up? Where are you allowed to stand in the ceremony? Can you go up the aisle? Can you go down the sides? There's some priests are quite chilled out, but a lot of them aren't. So you've got to just respect the boundaries of the ceremony and stuff. And I always think that it is a service first, and then we're just documenting. So I don't like to get in the way of anything like that, and I will respect boundaries if people do set them. But there's a lot more that you need to do before you actually get to the shooting prospect of that. There needs to be a whole client funnel. There needs to be you need to set a contract that has clear expectations and deliverables in there so that everyone knows what's expected and what's not. You need to have eventualities that you're sick or you can't make the wedding. What happens then? Do you have people that you call, or do you get someone from Facebook or something like that? The couple needs to know these things in case they do happen. Like, what way's payment sorted out? Do you do it where you have a deposit and then the full amount? Now, the way that I would do it is I always take 50% as a deposit to secure the date. So I always say to them, your date is not secure until you've paid the 50%. Once you've done that, then I'll block that date off and that's yours. And then the remaining 50% is always 14 days before the wedding. I've never shot a wedding and been paid afterwards. That's not the way I operate. I don't want to chase people for payments. And the incentive is that if you don't pay the remaining 50%, then I don't turn up because you gotta be paid. And the way that people can verify this is you looking at Google reviews and seeing you interact on Facebook with couples, things like that. So that's the way I would do it. Maybe you're not in a position where you can command that sort of, I need 50% now, so you might just take a deposit. Usually that would be around £200-300 to secure the date. That's what I used to do before I started charging 50%. But I did have a woman who cancelled on me, and it left me a bit out of pocket. It was kind of when I was asking for the 14 days before the wedding, so that's why I increased mine to 50%. So yeah, you need to have a discussion with them, get on Zoom or meet up with them if they're close, and just talk about what your style is, what way we're going to shoot this, and what's happening. Is there any surprises that are going to happen, things like that. You just need to be prepped for the day, and ideally have a Google form, and then get them to fill it out with what's happening on the day, so that you've got that with you, so you don't forget anything. You know when things are happening, where they're happening, groom prep, bridal prep, ceremony, things like that, reception, what time you're leaving, hours.
Something that you said was really interesting. What do you do? What have you got in place if you're unwell or injured or something takes place for it? Say, for example, it's almost the week of the wedding, then, hypothetically, you just come down with a really bad illness or you break your leg or something crazy like that. What are you going to do?
I have contacts that I can call up and ask, are you free? Can you shoot this wedding? Can you associate for me? And then I'll do the editing. And what I'll do is I'll assure the couple that I've instructed the videographer who's coming that they're going to shoot this in my style, and it's going to be me editing the film. So you'll still get the same deliverables. It just won't be me shooting it.
What happens if they would say, well, you know what, Tom, we have hired you because it's you. We don't want your buddy shooting the wedding. We want our deposit back. What's the conversation then?
They don't get the deposit back because it's written in the contract that they're not hiring me. They're hiring the company that I represent. That's just the way that I work. Right, okay. You can do it differently. I mean, it depends on the situation. If I want to return the deposit, that's at my discretion. Sometimes I will if it's an outstanding situation, but they have signed an agreement. They've read through that and they've agreed that they've hired my company, not me as an individual. And I do state that to them.
And that's important to make sure that everything is very black and white and in the contract initially. So there isn't any kind of issues because you've agreed to all the different circumstances, what could actually happen. Like, for example, if you're a company or you're not, if it states in the contract that if for some reason due to illness or injury, I will get, a recognisable or a suitable videographer, and you can prove that they're a suitable whatever videographer or wedding shooter especially, you can prove that they're up for the task, then realistically they'd have to go along with it because they've agreed to your kind of safety net if anything happened to you.
Yeah. Well, if I couldn't find anyone who I thought was good enough, I would return the deposit. I would return all the monies paid, and allow that. I'd help them to find someone else. So it comes down to your discretion. If you've got that in your contract, it's your choice. But I would be more likely to go in the direction of keeping the clients happy, unless it was. I doubt this would ever happen to me, but it's more so if they try and change the way that they're functioning things that you would want to keep the deposit. So if they're trying to like hire someone else or things like that, that deposit's there to protect you from the absence of work.
I think realistically, if it's that close to the wedding, whereas if they didn't go with who you provided as your substitute, they'd have to literally get a whole new wedding videographer in within that week, or they're not having their wedding videoed. So I think realistically and likely the best course of action for them would actually just be go along with it, because otherwise they run the risk of not having it captured at all when you're offering somebody who is more than up to the task to fill in when you can't.
Yeah, exactly. But that's just the prep that you need to do and stuff, and it's difficult on your first time doing it, but it is for me it's just it's almost like a habit now. I know what I'm doing when I turn up and stuff, and I know what I need to get. I think what a lot of people do, especially for like first timers with weddings, is at bridal preps, they'll tend to focus on the bride way too much, and they'll get like 50 shots of the bride in different positions and like getting her makeup done and all stuff like that. I just don't think you need to focus on her that much. Like you need maybe 10 to 15 good shots, but a lot of people miss the details, so they don't go and get the rings, they don't get the earrings or the wedding dress or the shoes, or they need to focus more on the bridesmaids or things like that. You're there to tell the story of the day. You need to make the bride look good, but you also need to tell what's happening. What food did they eat in the morning? Is the croissants on the table and stuff like that? What does the jewelry look like? What does the room look like? Because these are all things that the couple are going to want to experience again when they watch that video back.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a video that potentially could show the kids in the future.
Yeah.
Or they'll show family members. So when the idea being when they're old and grey, they can watch it back. And 50 years previous, they can watch this video of their special day. One thing that I've always wondered, because my limited experience shooting weddings is different from my experience of shooting commercials and corporate and documentaries. In that world, I'm pretty much in charge because I am the DOP. When I shot the wedding, I didn't challenge them because it wasn't suitable at the time, but I felt the photographer was calling the shots, and I was almost playing second fiddle to the photographer and what the photographer wanted. Is it important for the videographer to speak up, or should they really play secondary to the photographer? How does that relationship work?
It's come along since I've started. When I first started, it was very much like what you've just described just then, where it's mainly the photographer who thinks that you're just sort of coming along for the ride and it's their shoot. But there's two things at play. It depends on your style as a videographer. What way do you want to do things? That's not my style, to sit back and let the photographer do all the poses and stuff like that, and I just film whatever they're filming. That's not the way that I personally function. But there are good wedding filmmakers out there who don't interfere with anything on the day or tell people to do anything. Whereas and it was like that for the most part a couple of years ago. And you can still I still run into photographers these days who do think it is their shoot and you're just a guest on that shoot. So what you've got to do really is speak up and say like, no, I need this. Because like video's different. You need more movement. I require more things like more flow and things like that, and more walking. So what I'll do a lot of the time, if I'm dealing with someone who's particularly difficult, and it has happened a couple of times, what I'll say to them is, you just get everything that you need. And then once you're done, let me know, and then I'll come in and I'll do 10 to 15 minutes of whatever I need, and that usually works out. Whereas if you're working with someone who is courteous and understands that you've got a job to do as well, usually what will work is you'll have like one go each. So the photographer will pose them, then you can pose them, then the photographer will pose them, and it goes back and forth. So that's usually how that works. But yeah, it can be quite difficult because you've got to negotiate these things, because if you form a bad relationship with a photographer straight off the bat when you get to the preps, you're going to have someone who's working against you for the rest of the day, which is a difficult position to be in. Because say, for example, I've had it before where a photographer's gone and took the couple out for a couple shoot and just not told me, and I've just been standing there filming guests and stuff, and it is courteous to come and tell me that you're taking them out into the really nice light at the minute. You know, I would never do that the other way around. I would never take the couple out and not tell the photographer, because I just think it's rude. So if you do have in that particular occasion though, we didn't have a bad relationship. She just forgot about me, was what she said. So it just can be a bit frustrating like that. So you want to keep people on side for the most part. So it's just being more diplomatic about your approach and stuff, being assertive but not aggressive with it, if that makes sense.
Have you had any conflict with any photographers?
No, not open conflict. I've had frustrating situations where I've set up a camera and I've told them, like, this is my safety cam. Just if you're walking past it, just try and duck under it or go around it, and you'll be at the other end of the church, and you look back and see them just stood right in front of it. And you obviously, it's hard you can't really scream across the church and tell them to move, can you? So you just you got to try and adapt and think, okay, I can't move now because there's no safety shot because there's someone in front of it and stuff. I find a lot of photographers aren't very courteous of things like that. But for the most part, I get on with most people. Most people aren't doing it intentionally. They're just they're trying to do their job. You're trying to do your job. And obviously, my video camera isn't their concern. They're thinking about their deliverables. So it's just trying to you get better at this with experience. You kind of learn where the photographer's going to go, and don't put your camera there, because 9 times out of 10 they're not going to remember to stand on the other side of your camera. Things like that.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So in terms of structure, you're going to get there early, you're going to shoot the bride in the best possible way. The story starts with the bride getting ready, then the bridesmaids perhaps with her and maybe family and what they're doing. After you've shot that, will you then go and shoot the groom, or will you leave the groom alone?
Depends on the requests. By default, I'll do both. But this is why you've got to ask where they're getting ready, because a lot of the times over here, the groom will be getting ready 30 minutes away from the bride. If they're doing it together, then I'll always just do both, because it's quite convenient. Cause say the groom's only like a 5-minute walk in a different hotel room, you're going to get the groom anyway. But if the groom's, say, 30 minutes away, that's where I'll ask them as a couple. I'll say, do you want groom preps? And we're going to have to factor in the journey time between me going to the groom, coming back to the bride. Because the thing is, if it is both, what you'll do is you'll start with the bride, then you'll go to the groom, then you'll go back to the bride. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So what kind of things would we expect to see with the groom? What are you going to shoot with the groom?
You would shoot him putting his suit on. You'd shoot his the rings, because he'll usually have the rings, the ties, whatever they're eating, things like that. Just a lot of details and stuff. Them interacting as like friends and stuff, the groomsmen. Anything that's sort of happening there. You can pose him a little bit, put him near the window. Any kind of natural light, because it's not very convenient to carry around lights at a wedding, apart from speeches. That's the only time I would ever throw lights up, but I wouldn't be throwing them up at preps or anything like that.
Yeah, I suppose so. All right, okay, so you've shot the bride, you shot the groom, you probably go back to the bride. Will you travel with the bride to the church?
No.
Or will you not? What will you do then?
Very rare occasions will I do that, if it's a particularly awkward setup, or if we haven't got a lot of time or things like that, but I won't travel with the bride. I'll usually wait until what will usually happen as a videographer is you'll have the first look with the mum and dad, and then you can leave then after that, because then they'll go straight into bridal photos. So they'll have the bridal party and they'll do photos, and I don't need to be there for that. And the photographer can just get in the car and turn up at the venue, throw a flash on and be ready to shoot. Whereas for me, I've got to get there early. Say I need like at least 10 minutes before the bride's going to arrive. I'll want to get there, and I'll want to mic up the groom, set my cameras up, get my white balance sorted, and have all my positions ready to go.
Right, good. So you do that. You shoot the actual ceremony. Do you mic anybody up at the ceremony, or just is it just more montage kind of stuff?
It depends on the. I'll always mic someone up, but it depends on the setup. Have they got their own audio system that I can plug into? Do I need to put lav mics on people? how close are they all standing together. One thing that's quite important is to tell the bride and groom to face each other, because if they're not facing each other, then his microphone won't pick up the bride, and you want to only mic him up. You don't really want to be micing up the bride, because there's no easy position to put a mic on a bride.
Yeah, it's much easier to put it on. You know, stereotypically he's probably wearing a suit. Stereotypically she's probably wearing a really nice wedding dress.
Exactly.
So obviously it's quite a different, very, very different dynamic. Yeah, and I can imagine somebody making that mistake, a rookie error trying to mic a bride up, and it might not go great.
There's no pockets either.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know where you'd put the receiver. It could be a bit awkward.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you do that, you film that. Obviously you've got your safety shots as well, so you might get shots of the people who are seated, get their reactions and things like that. So you've done that. After that, what's next?
So after that, you'll go outside and you'll do there'll be group shots. You can get a couple of those. I tend not to use group shots that much in my films, but it depends on whether you want that. I'll usually get it. I won't get it where the family just stood together. I might get a couple of shots of that, but they probably won't make the film. I'll get a lot of shots where they'll get to the end of the group shots with the photographer, and they'll do like cheers, or they'll be doing more movements. I'm just focusing on the movement kind of stuff, and whilst that's happening, I might go and fly the drone, or I might get detailed shots of the venue where they got married. I'll do stuff like that, and then we'll move to the couple shoot. Usually I'll do 2 couple shoots. So the first one will be during the day. We'll take them around where they got married, and we'll do some shots there. Then they'll go to the venue. They'll have canapes, things like that, what we call a cocktail hour over here, and you just film people chatting, eating, decor, things like that.
Yeah, just trying to because it's interesting to have other people in there as well, because again, if you have that perspective that they're going to watch it back years to come, it's nice to see other family members who may no longer be with you in 30, 40 years time. So it's nice to see them and kind of remember people on that special day. So you've done that, so what comes next? Because obviously we're now moving later into the evening.
So now we're getting to speeches. So we'll film the speeches, we'll mic people up, we'll plug into the audio system. Usually I'll have a 3-camera setup. I'll have one on the speaker, one on the couple, one on the crowd. And the one that's on the couple and one on the speaker, I'll either have an assistant who'll monitor those 2 cameras, because they can be quite close to each other, or I'll leave them 2 rolling, and I'll stick on a monopod with the 3rd camera, and I'll be getting audience reactions, things like that. You know, like if someone mentions someone's dad, then you'll want to find them, and then you'll want to film them reacting to whatever's going on, if you can. These aren't crucial shots, but it's good to have. You know what I mean? So you can have a little cutaway and stuff like that. So that's quite handy.
Will you film the whole speech and give them the whole speech in the video, or will it just be like montage clips of the speech?
It'll be the whole speech. I deliver the full speeches.
Because if you're shooting a video that's only 6 minutes long, the speech could be 3, 4.
Yeah. Well, no, I wouldn't deliver the whole speech in the highlights film. I'd have bits of the speech in the highlights film, but the ceremony and speeches films will be 2 separate films that I'll deliver entirety.
Right, got you right.
Yeah.
How long's a ceremony and speech film?
Depends on how long the ceremony goes on for. It's literally a multicam edit of the whole ceremony, multicam edit of the whole speeches delivered in full. So if it goes on for 3 hours, it's 3 hours long. If it's 20 minutes, it's 20 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so you've done the speeches. Do you then film the first dance, if they have one?
Usually what will happen after the speeches is they'll mill about for a bit. They'll eat, or they'll eat before then. We'll do another couple shoot at golden hour, which is usually about then. Depends on, I'm talking about summertime weddings. So then we'll have golden hour, and then after golden hour we'll come back in. They'll go straight into the first dance. We'll film that, and then we'll film the guest dancing. We'll pick up any other shots of like the venue, the location, the details. We'll get all that stuff, and then cake cut, done. That's usually it.
Brilliant. No, that's really well explained. So the next question is, obviously everybody has different equipment, but what would you, without going into specifics, what equipment, just for video alone, would you advise or recommend?
You need a camera that's versatile and good in low light. You'll need ND filters. You'll need some sort of audio device. I think the days of just filming a montage and not using any audio equipment are over in this industry. I think you do need at least a lav mic. You can get away with an onboard microphone, but you need a lav mic really, because otherwise you'd have to be really close to the couple to pick up anything that's happening in the ceremony. So that's only good for specific ceremonies. So yeah, you need that. A gimbal is optional. You don't need a gimbal to get started, but I use a gimbal a lot in my stuff. You'll need a tripod. I'd say a heavy duty tripod, because what people only realize when they get there is guests who walk past your camera will cause a lot of shake. So people will walk very close to your camera, so you're going to need a heavy duty tripod just so it doesn't fall over, and also so it's not shaking too much when people are walking past it. But yeah, you just need a camera that ideally can shoot 4K to future-proof you, but 1080 is still okay. You can get away with that. Maybe like a 28-75 Tamron lens, or you can get away with something like that. Something that's fast. A 2.8 would be ideal. I don't think you can do it on a kit lens. And then at least one good prime. But you could get away all day using a zoom lens. But I think a nice prime would be good.
I think, well, obviously, I think with the zoom lens, you've got that flexibility, especially if you're rocking a gimbal. If you can put a zoom on a gimbal, you can have that flexibility to get tighter shots and get wider shots without having to stop your gimbal, take the lens off, put a new lens on, recalibrate your gimbal, and then get shooting again. Because in that process, you might have lost whatever it is you're trying to shoot. It's something that's... A wedding is very much like, I suppose, a bit more like a documentary where... the dog's just come in. One sec. Right, Neela, come on. Anyway, we'll cut that bit out. So, what was I going to say? So a zoom lens, I can see a zoom lens being really beneficial actually, especially if you can get one with 28-75, something like that, 24-70. Even a lens that I love, but I think super underrated. I think it's only because it's got an f-stop of 4. It's a 24-105. It's so versatile.
See, I think that's great though.
Lovely compression.
That'd be an ideal lens, but I think you need to have one of the newer cameras for that. If you say, for example, someone who's starting out gets an A7 III, I don't think that lens is going to be ideal for weddings, because you can't necessarily light every situation that you're in. So I would say a faster lens, if you're using an older camera, is what you're going to need. You're going to need like a 2.8 at least for something like that. Because these ceremonies and these speeches and the dance floor footage especially, it can be quite challenging with the lighting conditions. And not every venue is going to be happy with you just throwing lights up. You can throw lights up at most of them, but if you do start getting a light out and it starts interfering with, say, the DJ's lights, or it's interfering with the venue's lighting, or it's creating a trip hazard or things like that, you got insurance for that, things like that will start to creep in. Whereas those things can be avoided if you've got a faster lens where you don't need to throw the lights up.
Do you have any trouble with white balance? Because obviously you're going through so many different kinds of different light temperatures. Do you have any issues with that?
I tend to avoid auto white balance these days because it changes during shots, which can be an issue. But I find that with these weddings, you're changing locations, but not that often. So you're dealing with maybe 5 different color temperatures that you've got to deal with, and usually I can just manually set it each time. And I try and do that because I'm working with 3 cameras. I try and keep them all synced with that, so that we're not messing around with colors and stuff in the edit. We're not trying to change anything like that.
Yeah, don't make life difficult for yourself. So, what about drones? Do you have much demand for
it? No one really asks about it, but I just do it anyway. That makes sense. I think it does up the wow factor for the films, though.
Is that an additional cost?
Yeah, it is an additional cost. Now it is, but I've only just recently introduced that.
I think. Well, obviously, I've got a commercial license and I use drone quite a lot with different. I shot something that'll show later, just yesterday, purely on drone on a beach with a horse. I know it sounds unusual, but it's actually turned out really, really nice.
That sounds really cool.
And that was just totally a drone. I mean, a camera couldn't do what a drone can do, because I wanted the camera in this case, which was obviously mounted on the drone, to keep up with a galloping horse on a beach. And to do that, I unless I was in a vehicle, but again, you're talking about a horse, and you don't want to spook the horse.
I'm picturing the Lloyd's TSB advert.
Not quite. It was just I think there's multiple horses, and that was a single horse, but it was. I really like the way it's turned out, and I'll reveal more at a later date.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like drones. I think you can do a lot with a drone, not just kind of like the high up in the sky kind of stereotypical drone shot, but you can almost use it as a second camera at times, or you can use it at eye level or at camera level to catch some really interesting shots with great motion, because it does actually, in my opinion, look smoother than, well, what I can produce running with a gimbal, especially at high speeds.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can't go as quick as a drone with the gimbal, obviously. And now, obviously, like 422 10-bit, most drones can do that. So if you know how to color grade, and you know in my case, he's a DJI. If you know how to color grade the D-Log, and it did take me a little bit. It has its little different quirks to it compared to, say, S-Log, which is what I always shoot with, being a Sony user. But yeah, I'm massive on drones. I think you can do some really awesome stuff with them if you use them and think a little bit more outside the box.
It's crazy how much the barrier to entry for things like that has been reduced over the past couple of years. Like, remember when you would need like a helicopter to do something like that, and now you can spend $1,000 on a drone and have it within a day and be doing stuff like that. And especially over here where the commercial drone licenses are way easier to get. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's probably a bad thing because it's so much harder in the UK to get one. You do see a lot more drones over here, I've found, from my experience anyway. A lot more people have them and are flying them about the city and stuff.
Yeah, to get a drone license in the UK, it was pretty much the same as getting a driving license, where I had to do a theory test and I had to revise for it and practice it for months on end. Then I had to sit in a room with a guy and do the theory test. Then after I passed the theory test, then I had to go out there and he put me through a practical test in the middle of this valley in Glossop between Manchester and Sheffield, and it was really, really nerve-wracking. There were certain things that he was asking me to do. For a second I thought, can I actually do that? Different things we weren't allowed to look at, even at the monitor, the screen, there was lots of different elements to this test, and in fairness, he really put me through it. And luckily I passed, and I passed first time, so we had a good chat after it where he was very reassuring what he said to me. But yeah, it was tough.
Interesting. Yes, it's a lot easier over here. From what I haven't done the UK one, but the one over here was quite easy compared to the way that sounded.
Yeah, it was. At times I did question, am I actually going to pass this? But luckily I did. And even now, obviously, with all the flight protocol and making sure that you're doing all the right things, I still always get a little bit nervous with the drone. I do. There's always this element of, like, obviously you can take all the precautions, do everything right, but there's still that little bit of fear in me that if something goes wrong and it drops out of the sky.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Like, especially if you see like a flock of birds coming over or something like that. I suppose that's the good thing about being over here. A lot of the times I'm using the drone, I'm in the middle of nowhere, so if it does fall, it's not going to hit anyone on the head or anything like that. It's going to land in some field. It's not going to damage like a really expensive house or...
Oh, you're absolutely right. And obviously by the beach, you do get seagulls, and seagulls are very, very curious about what a drone is. And at times when you find the drone around, you look at the screen, you keep it in your line of sight, and you can see them circling the drone. And I am always worried that one of them might get too close and they might hit one of the propeller blades, which could easily happen, or one of them might try and swoop and attack it, thinking it's some kind of enemy. There's all these other factors that you have to consider when flying a drone, as well as getting that really, really nice drone shot.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Right, that's brilliant. Right, Tom, wrap it up in a minute. Have you got anything going on next week?
This week, today I'm going out to a real estate shoot in a place called Richmond, which is about 20 minutes south of here. That's going to be quite simple to do. Nice house down there that I'm going to be filming. And then actually I've got another big job this week. I'm driving out to a place called Jasper National Park in Alberta, which is about 8-hour drive from here. So I'm driving up there on Friday for a wedding I've got on Saturday, and then I'm driving back on Sunday. So I'm going to be doing 8 hours in the car, probably listen to a couple of podcasts and stuff, get me through. And what I'm actually trying to do to try and be effective and efficient is I'm trying to get real estate jobs on the way to that job, so I can stop in different towns and do a real estate video, and it just makes the trip a little bit more economical. So I'm trying to double the two up, because it's very different out there to what we get here. It's a very much urban city kind of vibe, whereas out there it's a lot more rural, countryside estates and stuff. So I'm trying to vary the portfolio with some of that stuff.
That sounds really good. Well, you know what, right? Okay, next week, obviously today we've covered weddings. Let's talk about real estate and estate agencies, because I've worked with a number of different real estate agencies over here in the UK. all want something different, a different look, a different vibe, a different feel. And I think it's a massively growing industry when paired with video, especially when you've got programs like Selling Sunset and $1 Million Listing and Lux Listings, the Australian one, where they're making some exceptionally slick videos to showcase these properties. There's so many different factors in it, but I think we should talk about next week because I'm currently working with a real estate company, and I've actually been approached by another one very recently as well, and everybody wants different things. So let's talk about that because I think a lot of people might be interested in how we tackle that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Right, brilliant. Right, Tom, I will catch you next week with the camera guys.
Let's see you next week for the camera guys.